I am sharing my screen. Are you able to see it?
Not yet. No, sir.
Sharing. I am able to see your screen, Prashant.
Sir, I am able to see. Screen is visible, sir.
Maybe network problem for your end. Okay. Use you.
Sir, it's still not visible.
Okay, you did not recharge your.
Okay, then I left. After then I joined. Wait, sir. Yes, sir. Now I can see your screen. Yes, sir. Now I can see.
Everyone able to see my screen? Yes, sir. Okay, it's my actually fourth session. And the last three sessions, I have covered the basics of Servlet API and how to use to create an application using Servlet and JSP. So, some of you are new today. And today, actually, I want to start as the advanced part like listener, event, and filter part. So, till now, we have covered. And Servlet API, there are mainly two packages. One is Java.Servlet, and another is Java.Servlet. The classes and package are HTTP specific, and this is not protocol specific. Okay. Till now, we have covered this one, and we have covered the Servlet interface, the internal structure of Servlet interface, the internal structure of Servlet request, Servlet response, request dispatcher, Servlet config, right? And the classes like generic Servlet, we have used. There are actually three ways to create a Servlet, create a user Servlet. First of all, directly implementing the Servlet interface. Next one, extending the generic Servlet class, and another one, extending distributor class, right? Now, today it's a new topic. Today we'll start with Servlet context listener and Servlet context event. After this is considered as a basic part of Servlet. These are the basic topics. These are the advanced topics. Okay. So let's start with listener and event. There are actually two types of listener and event. One is Servlet context listener, Servlet context event, HTTP session event, HTTP session listener, and Servlet request event, Servlet request listener. The other is Servlet request attribute event, Servlet request attribute listener, Public context attribute different. Public context attribute different. Do you have anyone? Do anyone have any idea about this? What is listener and what is event? Hello. 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 Am I audible? Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir, it's audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I am audible, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Please respond. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So do you have any idea? Do anyone have any idea about what is listener event? And when to use it? How to use it? Anyone?
No, sir.
Okay. So first of all, how many programming languages do you know? Please tell me the programming languages name. Like C, C++, do you know? VB, Visual Basic, do you know? Shell, actually it's not a programming language, it is a scripting language. Shell script, Java, any other? I think Python. Can you tell me the type of this language like C, C++, VB, Java, Python, which kind of language? Kind of means there are many, many more categories. Categorize them. So if you categorize as there are mainly two types of programming language. One is procedural, another is hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Please respond now. Okay. VB is which kind of language? Like Java, we know that it is a object-oriented programming language, right? But VB is which kind of language? C is which kind of language? C which kind of language? Java? Java is which kind of programming language?
Object-oriented.
Object-oriented. C which kind of?
Procedure.
Exactly, it is a procedural language. Visual Basic?
Yeah.
That is an event-driven programming language. Event-driven programming language. Why it is called event-driven programming language? Did you have any experience with VB? Maybe in your academic session? Did you learn VB?
No, sir.
Okay, in VB programming is very interesting and very easy and interesting also. Like Java, you have to code too many things, but in VB, you don't need to code too much thing. Okay, you just write the action. Okay, and define in VB, you just have to define the event and action against the event. Okay. So first of all, I am telling you this because today I am going to discuss event and listener. Okay. That's why. So what is event? Like all of you know, I think that our Windows operating system has been written in Visual Basic, right? Because Windows directly support VB, right? If you are a VB developer, Visual Basic Programming Language developer, then it is very interesting also and very easy VB programming. All of you need to create a window. All of the thing is Windows. That's why the operating system is called Windows. Okay. Like if I click on this, it is a window. So it is an app. But inside a window. Everything is window. In a window, leave it. So what is event? Anything occurred, that is an event. Like if I right click on it, it is an event. If I left click on it, it is an event. If I double click on it, anything, it is an event. The double click is an event. Okay. And the action behind this, suppose if I right click on this window, it will show us this bar. If I right click on the taskbar, it will show us different. Why? Because right click is an event. If I right click on this section, the action behind this event is written to show you this kind of menu. Okay. If I right click on taskbar, right click is an event, but action behind this has written this way that it will show you this menu bar. Okay. So this is click anything. Suppose single click, double click on any app. Like if I click on recycle bin, it will open this window. Okay. Double click is an action. In double click, what will happen? It will be open. Anything written. Okay. So that's why it is called event-driven programming language. Why event-driven? Because each and every event, with respect to each and every event, there is an action. You, as a programming language developer, you are a programming language, you are a VB developer, you just have to define the action. Okay, and the event for a particular event. Right. Suppose, let's run our application. In the last three sessions, we have created a very little application, very simple application. Okay. This is our first page, registration.jsp. You can see that there are actually two buttons. One is reset, another is register. Suppose you have clicked on reset button, that is an event. Click on register button, that is also an event. Right click on it, that is an event. Hover the mouse on it, you can see that the color will be a little bit changed, right? Lighter to deeper. So that is also an event. Move the mouse or hover the mouse. All of you do with mouse, that is an event, okay? But in case of Servlet and JSP, why the event has been used? Like Servlet request event, Servlet context event. What is the use of it? It doesn't have anything anything to do with the mouse. Okay. So first of all, to explain this event and listener, let me tell you about the scope of Servlet. It's very important. It's not for Servlet actually. In any application, there are mainly three types of scope. One is application, another is session, another is request. One is application scope, session scope, request. What is the application scope? In the context, hello, context, session and request. Hello. Hello. Do you have any idea about context scope? Really, context and application is the same scope. It's called as context. Suppose we have created a project. Suppose this is our project. If we run the project or if we deploy our project and start the server, for the entire application, there will be only one context object. Okay. In case of Servlet, actually our Servlet context, this Servlet context is responsible to represent the context or application scope. In case of session, our HTTP session is responsible to handle the session scope, and Servlet request is responsible to handle the request scope. Application has a big scope. Request has a very little scope, very little line. Why? Application, that means in every application, suppose a banking application, IRCTC application, Facebook application, any application. When you deploy the application and start the server, then for the entire project, there is only one context object. That means there is the big scope, that is application scope. If we assign any attribute to that application scope, as long as the project is running on server, you will get the value. The scope is alive or the object is alive. Okay. Session means it is of a big scope as long as the user is in session. I think you know about session and request. Request has a very little life. Suppose we click on the register button. A new request has been generated. The response came from the server. And the request is gone. So it has the most little life. Okay. So when you talk about Servlet context, like this is the class Servlet context, or not class, this is the interface. This Servlet context is responsible to handle the application scope. Okay. So let's start with this context. So first of all, for every scope, there is a class, event is class, and listener is interface. All the events are class, and all the listeners are interfaces. Okay. So for Servlet context, there is an interface, that is Servlet context listener, and there is an event, that is Servlet context event. Okay. First, start with this. This is class. This is interface. Okay. So what we can do with this listener? What is that? So first of all, begin with the occurrence of something. Actually, the main definition is changing the scope of object at the time of when object state is changed. That is actually event. when the state of an object is changed, then it is called an event. And using the listener interface, we can do something on it as per the requirement. Got my point? Event means occurrence of something or changing the state of an object. That is called an event. Something occurs. That means some event has occurred. Okay? Like I have right click on it. Just click on it, it is an event. Right click on it, it is an event. Move the mouse, an event. Hover the mouse on any app, that is also an event. Okay. And using the listener interfaces, you can do something on it. Suppose, very simple example is, suppose I want, and it is a requirement also in many projects, that when we start our application, I want some data to be fetched from database. Table, some configuration tables. Okay. Or any kind of example you can think about. So, understand of event and some internal structure of event and listener, internal structure of every event and listener. Okay.
স্যার অ্যাকচুয়ালি ইকো হচ্ছে তো
কি হচ্ছে আমার ভয়েস? হ্যালো, এখন
ঠিক আছে
okay. So first of all, an event object. Let me show you the internal structure. Then I will create an example. Okay. It is not mandatory to show you the internal structure, but if you understand it, it will be better for you. Okay. So first of all, we have an class. The name of the class is event objects. That is public class event object. It serializable, or it extends serializable. Okay, just leave it. Keep a public simple class. It has an object type. It has a float. The type of variable is object. As a constructor, parameter is constructor. Event object. Object source. It is your source. And it has two methods. One is this source, another is source name. Public get source. You return the source. Return source. Another is public string source string. It becomes the process. Okay. So this is the internal structure of event object. Each and every event class. Right? How many event classes are there? Sublet context event, sublet request event, okay. Initiative package, initiative session event, initiative event, binding event. All the event classes and attribute event all the event classes directly or indirectly extend this event object. Okay. Now let's start with subject context event. The internal structure of subject context event is subject context event. Extend which class? Each and every event directly or indirectly. Extend which class? This event of the class. And subject context event, most of the event classes, internal structure of most of the event classes are same. Most of the, okay. One or two, just I will show. Remaining are the same. First, the subject context event has a constructor. Each and every event has a constructor. And it is a parameterized constructor. Subject context event, subject context source. Subject context. Just call the parent constructor. The internal structure of every event classes, most of them is the same. Okay. Each and every event class has a constructor, parameterized constructor. And inside this parameterized constructor, the main object that is there, it is subject context object. It is assigned to the parent one. Super dot source. Okay. It is a constructor also. It extends event object. So when we will call super dot source, which constructor will be called? Which constructor will be called?
Event object.
Exactly. Which constructor will be called? So what this constructor does is actually assign the past object to this local one. Okay. It holds the source object. Actually, it holds the source object. Now, public context event is another method that is public context. It returns the so on. Okay. Return. Exactly, this is the internal structure of sublet context event. Okay. Each and every event class has a parameterized constructor. Okay. And it corresponding some methods. Like in sublet context event, it has one method that is get sublet context. It returns the sublet context. So first of all, try to understand the internal structure or internal how it works. Okay. First of all, when sublet context event, when this event will occur, when sublet context event will occur. Event means occurrence of something, right? When sublet context event will occur. First question is there. Context when we start the application, okay, when we run the application, when deploy the application, okay. Then for the entire application, there is only one context object. That's it. At the time of deployment, our application or deployment of our project is sublet context event will occur. If you want to do anything, when you deploy the project, first start the server, or when you try to run the project, If you want to do anything on that time, then you can do that with the help of public context listener. Okay. Now, let's see the internal structure of public context listener. This is the address. Public context listener. Distance, event, listener. Like event object. Let me show you. Event object is a class. Event listener is also another class. Each and every listener, directly or indirectly, extends event listener class. Okay. Each and every event class, directly or indirectly, extends which class? Event object. And each and every directly or indirectly extends which class? Event listener. It is an interface, so it can have only abstract methods, right? So in each and every listener, there are some abstract methods. In public context listener, there are exactly two abstract methods. One is public void context initialized, and public void context and both are parameterized. In each and every method of listener, it passes the corresponding event object. For sublet context listener, which one is the corresponding event class? It is the sublet context event, not sublet request or not sublet request attribute. Okay. So that is exactly the internal structure of sublet context listener. It is an interface. Now, okay. So for each and every event, for each and every event class, extends event object. Each and every listener interface extends event listener class. Okay.
Yes, sir.
The structure of an event class. Each and every event class must have a parameterized constructor. Okay. Like sublet context event, it has a parameterized constructor. Another event class also have some parameterized constructor. Okay. And some methods. Inside of each and every listener interface, there are some methods, all are abstract methods, and it passes the corresponding event object. Like for sublet context listener, the corresponding event object is sublet context event. Okay, it passes that event. First, stop the server. Okay. Now, suppose our application. you can see already some listener has started the work. As you can see, Russian local listener. If they like the listener, it is from Servlet. I want the context of it. Actually, the log is vary from one person to another person. Okay. So we have started our project. We have run our project. So the server, you can see the server has been started, and inside the server, one project is already running. That is the name of the project is web app 1. Okay. So for this web app 1, already a context object has been created by the server. I think you know that, right? When we run our application, for the entire application, one context object is created by the server internally, right? So if we want to do something when we deploy our project, and in some projects this is also necessary, like the project in I work right now, at the time of loading the application, it loads the data from database of some configuration table. For each and every project, some configuration is needed, right? You can maintain those configuration with the help of XML file, with the help of property file, and from database also by using database table also. Okay. In our project, it's maintained by database table. There are some configuration tables. So at the time of deploy our application, we load the data from that table. So suppose if we want to do that, or if it is required, okay, then how to do that? So using that listener or event, you can do that. Okay. So let me show you an example. Before that, if we are using Servlet context, first of all, I think I have already covered one parameter, that is init param. Init param. I think you know about init param, right? We have already covered in this last session init param. There is one type of param, that is context param. Today we are going to use that param. That is another param. The concept is init param is handled by which object or which database? Who is responsible to handle the init parameter? Among these classes and interfaces, who is responsible to handle init param? Hello. Hello. Who handles the init param? Subnet, subnet request, subnet response, request dispatcher, subnet context, subnet config, filter. Who is responsible to handle the init param? Hello, am I audible? Uh, okay, I have asked you who is responsible. It is a very simple question. In the last three sessions, I have covered up. Like, have you used unit param in your application? For which object would you use unit param? And who is responsible to handle this unit param? If you can't answer it, then it is useless to. Anyone? Hello. Anyone is able to answer it? যারা আজকে জয়েন করেছো তাদের বলছি না, যারা এতদিন ছিলে তাদেরকে জিজ্ঞেস করছি। When will you use unit param? Yes, if you don't interact, then it is very tough for me to continue the session. Hello. Hello. Hello, dear. You are there, but what about the other guy?
Yes, sir. We are here, sir.
I think for the last 2 or 3 minutes, I am asking something. You are not responding. You are new to this session. Okay. Leave it. I am showing you an example. If you have any problem, you can ask me. Okay. So the application has been deployed successfully, and we have run the project. So you can see the log here, that sublet context initialized. So from where this message is printing? This message is printing from this method, context initialized method. So first of all, when this event occurred, when we started the server. Okay. So for each and every project, like web app 1, the server has created an event object. Sorry, an context object. That is sublet context. Okay. So when this context has been initialized, then this method is called internally. Okay. And from this method, this message has been printed. So we found the point. After initializing the sublet context object, server internally call this method context initialize. Okay. And if we want to do anything inside, that is after initializing the sublet context, if we want to do anything, like suppose we want to add something on the context object. Okay. Or in the application scope, we simply say in application scope. If we want to add any attribute on application scope, then that is the point where we can do it. So inside of the initialize, suppose we want to place some character from context character. Those parameters is source country. And value suppose have made a change in web protection, so we need to restart the server. And now in context initialize, suppose we want to get that parameter. And how to do that? We have declared to one parameter, that is name of the parameter is country, the value of the parameter is suppose India. Okay. And these two name and value has been declared inside context parameter. So who is responsible to handle this parameter. Our sublet context is responsible to handle that parameter. So if you want to get that parameter name and param value, then we need sublet context object. Because only sublet context object store this parameter. Okay. And suppose here we want to get that parameter. Then from where we can get that parameter? From sublet context object we can get parameter. Right. So first we need sublet context object. First of all, we need sublet context object. But as you can see, as a parameter, passes sublet context event type of parameter. So we don't have sublet context object. Okay. So first we need to get that sublet context object. Sublet context object. Our requirement is to get the already created sublet context object. And from where we can get the sublet context object? From this object. And how? If we see the sublet context event class, this is our sublet context event class. Inside that class, there are exactly two methods. One is constructor, another is get sublet context. So, using this get sublet context, we can get our sublet context object, right? So, we have sublet context event. So, it dot get sublet context. If we call the method, it will return us the sublet context object that is already created by the server. Now we have context object, that is sublet context, and from the sublet context we can get these two parameters. Now if you call get unique parameter, and what is the parameter name? The parameter name is complete. The parameter value. The type of the value is string.
প্রতিদিন যেতে পারো হেঁটে হেঁটে যাবে রাস্তাঘাটে গাড়িতে যাবো হেঁটে হেঁটে চলে যাবে তাতে কি হবে প্রতিদিন যাতায়াতটা শুরু করতে হবে হেঁটে চলে আসবে
Now we are getting here the value of context. Okay. Now let's take it. It was normal.
সূর্য দেবতা ঘটে ওরা যেন তোমার বাড়ি ঢুকছে গ্যারান্টি আছে কোনো
So you can see here sublet context initialized with the message printing here, and after that we are printing the value of country.
চলো 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 চলো
So country is
চলো
getting the India, we are getting that from context parameter. Now
Sir, I have one question. Sir, server context equal to EV. Where is the EV? EV tag is.
the
Okay.
okay. So it is a very simple example. We just passed, we just get value from context parameter. But in practical scenario, really practical scenario in a project. We need to do for requirement, we need to do many things inside this method. Okay. Actually we do. So this is how we use this submit context listener application. Okay. And another message, the context destroyed. Question is
কি শোনা আর সময় নেই
when this context object is taken, and when this context object is destroyed, then who destroys this context object? Server actually always collected. Any object is destroyed by server, right? When server instruct or JVM instruct the garbage collector to destroy that object, and when JVM instruct the garbage collector to destroy that object, then server is stopped, right? Till now, we didn't get that server context is destroyed. Right? Now let's take. So we have run our project. Do anything in your context scope. Now, suppose you are stopping the server.
যত দিন যাচ্ছে তত
Server is stopped. Let's check the console.
এটা তোমার নাম আছে
Not printed. You can restart the server. I think the block is not printed properly. Okay. But I think if we restart the server, it is printed. You can find the old log. The new log has not been printed.
তাই বলতে শুরু করেছে
ভালোবাসতে কত এখন না হবে নিজের একটা জীবন আছে
নিজের জীবনটা আছে সরকার আমি জানি
না আমার ভেতরে বিষয় এটা
Server context initialized. It is not printing the new log. You can restart the server. I think this will work. I think if we restart the server from here, we will be able to see the message. Yeah. We have restarted the server. So first it need to stop the server. Let me show you. First stop it. Servlet context initialized. Country this. Context object has been initialized.
তোমার এইরকম এগুলো হবে না আমার সময় তোমার করলে হবে না তুমি জানতো না বাচ্চাটা
Starting to log now. So you have restarted the server. So first you need to stop the server, right? So at the time of stopping the server, this method has been called. You can see we have put here a breakpoint.
আরে বাবু
Breakpoint. Servlet context destroyed. Okay. So it is working, right? The problem is in Eclipse, the new log when you stop the server, the new log is not printed properly. But if you see the log file, then you can find it properly. Okay. In Eclipse console, if we stop the server, it doesn't print the new log. That is a problem, but it works always. So this is how to use servlet context listener. Maybe in your next project or any project, it is required to load some data from database inside this method. The requirement is, suppose at the time of loading the application, you need to load some data from database or some configuration table. Something important configuration, it is always secure to maintain by database, not by property file or XML. It is easy and it is suitable to maintain configuration on database table. Okay. So at the time of loading the application, suppose we need the number of users. Suppose for a simple application, simple example, suppose in some office you have seen that to enter the office, we need to swipe the card.
Yes, sir.
And it is maintained online, right?
Yes.
So what do you think? How it works actually, or it should work? Suppose I have to enter my office. I have swiped my card. I have swiped my card. So what it should do? And most specific in my card, I have a unique ID.
Yes.
And the input device. Actually, we swipe the card in an input device, right? The input device collect that or take the ID. And your application should process the ID, right?
Yes, sir.
So how it should process? Suppose I have swiped my card. Now my ID is suppose 123. Okay. So what your application should do with 123?
Check in the database that this ID is not.
Checking with the database, right?
Yes, sir.
So first understand this thing. I have an ID 123. Suppose it is 9:50 p.m. Right. It is a clear instruction for the employee to join your office within 10:30 or 10:15. Suppose 10:30. Okay. You have to enter. So it is a clear restriction from the company that you have to enter your office or join to your work within 10:30. Otherwise, you will be charged. Okay. Suppose it's now 9:50, and there are suppose 2,000 employees. In a single, suppose there are 1,000 employees in a single branch. Okay, and they have suppose 10 or 20 branches all over India. 20 branches in all over India, and in my branch, suppose there are 1,000 number of employees. So how many total employees? Suppose a simple application, there are 20 branches, and each branch has 1,000 number of employees. Then how many total employees are there? 20,000, right? So 20,000 employee, the probability is the 20,000 employee will enter before 10:30, and most of the cases 10 a.m. to 10:30. Okay, within that half of an hour time span, as per your logic, suppose I have swiped my card, it has taken the ID 123. Now our application should process 123. as you said, it should check with the database, right? Yes. So within the time span 10 a.m. to 10:30, that is within 30-minute time span, for each and every employee, it need at least one connection. For each and every employee must have at least one connection, right? Because how it will process? We have taken the ID 1, 2, 3. Now it need a connection to the database to check whether the ID 1, 2, 3 is active or not, or is present or not. Okay. So within the 30-minute time span, you need 2,000, 20,000 connection, along with your daily work. Is it not the only work to do for the application, right? The swiping the card or check the it is valid user or not. There are many other tasks also for this application, right? So
Yes.
within the 30-minute time span, if you do this way, your system will be hacked. Because within 30-minute time span, 20,000 login. That means 20,000 connection required. Your Tomcat server is unavailable. We are using Apache Tomcat server. This server is unable to do. You need at least OSPF WebLogic server. That is costly. This Tomcat server is unable to do that. So is it a proper solution?
No.
Do you have any idea how to do that? Or do you have any interest to know that?
Yes, sir.
I think you do have, others don't have. Okay. So one is very suitable, or I think in many projects, realize these kind of projects use this one. What actually we do when our application context is initialized, and first of all, it is daily work, right?
Yes, sir.
From 10 a.m. to 10:30, it needs 20,000 connection for the internal employee. Remaining other tasks, okay? And suppose 6 p.m. to and what I will say. At the time of entering the office, we always late, right? But when at the time of leaving the office, it's always early, right?
Yes, sir.
We have to leave within 6, right? When we check for when 6, when it will be 6 o'clock, right? Then we will leave the office. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So at 6 p.m. it will be high traffic, right? So 6 to 6:15, I think then also need 20,000 connection, and it is daily work. Now think about it. How metro station work? In metro station, if you want to enter in a station, you need the coin.
Yes, sir.
Does it every time check in the database this coin is valid or not? Or is it for the station? Which station you have to leave? So think about it. Okay. I'm telling just one of the solution. Okay. So it is a suitable solution that when context is initialized, you just retrieve the user data. Okay. Just retrieve the user data and load it into context object. One problem is with that. If you load 20,000 record in context object, your context object will be very bulky in size.
Yes, sir.
So that also have another solution. Okay. We use cache. We use cache memory for that to store that record. Okay. Why cache? Because cache is the most fast memory. I think you know that.
Yes, sir.
So there are other some technical thing to use cache memory for your application. Okay. So we store this kind of value in cache for fast processing. So when context is initialized, you just fetch those data 20,000 record in your context object, right? And store it in cache memory for fast performance. Now 10 a.m. to 10:30, 20,000 employees will come to your office. It needs 20,000 login, but without connecting a single connection. You don't need a single connection, right? So the application will be fast. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
So this is how we do that. And another thing, that was new employee joined. Then what? At the time of starting our application, we have already loaded 20,000 record. Now, suppose we have 20,000 one employee. Another new employee has joined. Then how to load instantly that user data? That is the next step. Okay. So without restarting the server, without redeployment, we can do that also. So these are the things. So it is a suitable example, I think. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
So this is one point where you can do it easily using listener. So this is about Servlet context listener and Servlet context event. So this is the I have shown you. This is the internal structure of Servlet context event, Servlet context listener. If you don't remember this thing, I think it will be tough for you. Now, let's come with we have covered Servlet context event and Servlet context listener. This one. Servlet context listener. Now, next, suppose Servlet request event, Servlet request listener. Okay. Before going to request, let's start with Servlet context attribute listener and Servlet context attribute event. Okay. As the name suggests, it is Servlet context listener and it is Servlet context attribute listener. So as the name suggests, you can guess that this listener is for to handle attribute only, as an attribute is there. Okay. So this listener is created to handle attribute only. So suppose we have added some attribute, we can remove some attribute or you can replace some attribute. Exactly these three tasks we can do with attribute. We can add attribute, we can remove attribute, we can replace an attribute and we can get attribute. Okay. So get attribute is not an event. Okay. Add an attribute is an event. Remove an attribute from context scope is an event. And replace an attribute, that is an event. And suppose there is another method that is get attribute. In Servlet context we will find another method that is get attribute. Get attribute is not an event. You are just getting. The value is already added. You are just getting the value. Many times you can fetch it. Okay. The event is when you add it. That why get attribute is not an event and add attribute is an event? Because by definition, what is event? Changing the state of an object is called event. Did I tell you it? By definition, what is event? The pure definition is changing the state of an object Okay. Now, suppose we have one object that is context. Suppose this is our object, context object. Inside context object, suppose there are 10 values are there. Okay. Till now, in context object, suppose there are 10 values are there. Actually, it internally handled by a map. Okay. So suppose for A, there is a value that is 10. For B, there is a value that is 30. For C, there is a value, suppose A. A is the key, 10 is the value. B is the key, 30 is the value. C is the key, 3 is the value. Now, this is our context object. There are exactly suppose 3 values are there. Now, suppose in a context object, we want to add another attribute. Suppose country. We have added another attribute. The attribute name is country and attribute value is India. So, before adding this attribute, okay, how many attribute was there? 3. Now we have added new one. Object has changed or not? The state, not object, state of an object has been changed or not? Now, we have replaced that attribute. Replace means change the value. Now it is India. We have replaced it by suppose USA. The state of an object has been changed or not? Changed. Now we have removed that attribute. The state of an object has been changed or not? So that's why add, replace and remove, it changes the state of an object. Now, this is our object, it has exactly 4 values, suppose. Now, inside any Java class, you are getting the value. Suppose getting the value. Suppose get parameter, get attribute. This is the way to get an attribute, right? It will return the value. It will return USA. Okay. Now 10 times you have called this method. State of this context object will be changed or not?
No, sir. Not changed.
Exactly. That's why the question is, with an attribute, what we can do? We can add attribute, we can remove attribute, we can replace attribute, and we can get the value of an attribute. Among these 4 tasks, get attribute is not an event because it doesn't change the state of this object. But adding an attribute, removing an attribute, replace an attribute, it changes the state of the object. That's why these 3 are event. Okay. So next we will continue with sublet context, attribute, listener, and sublet context, attribute, event. Okay. So if we talk about the internal structure of the sublet context attribute event and sublet context attribute listener. So I have already told you that in most of the cases, event, the structure of event and structure of listener are in most of the cases same. Structure is same, frame is the same. Maybe the method name is different, but structure is same. Each and every event directly or indirectly extend event object, and each and every listener directly or indirectly extend event listener. Till now we have seen sublet context event and sublet context event, sublet context listener. Now we will see the internal structure of sublet context attribute event, sublet context attribute listener. Let's start with sublet context attribute event. There is a class. Every event is a class, and every listener is an interface. Public class sublet context attribute event. It extends this event, sublet context event. So sublet context attribute event is a child of sublet context, and sublet context is child of event object. That is the hierarchy. Okay. Got my point?
Yes.
So these directly inherit sublet context event, and sublet context event inherit event object. Okay. So this event indirectly extends also event object, right? So previously I told you that each and every event has a parameterized constructor. Each and every event has a parameterized constructor. So this event also has a parameterized constructor. And it has two parameters, three parameters. So in each and every attribute there are three parameters. So first of all, sublet context attribute event. We must, actually not we, it is the internal structure, it is the inbuilt class. So it has exactly three parameters. One is sublet context source, then for each and every attribute there is a key and value, right? String, name, string, value, right? This is the key, this is the value. So this is the attribute name and this is the attribute value. And like context param name, param value. Okay. So what it does with these three parameters? Okay. So in sublet context, the internal structure is in sublet context attribute or any attribute. There are how many attribute event? Three attribute event. Sublet context attribute event, sublet request attribute event, HTTP session attribute event. Okay. For context, how many scope? Three scope. Application is handled by context object, sublet context. Session is handled by HTTP session, and request is handled by sublet. Request is handled by sublet request. So for sublet context, an event and listener is there. There is sublet context event and sublet context listener. For context attribute, sublet context attribute event and sublet context attribute attribute listener. For session, HTTP session listener, HTTP session event. HTTP session attribute event, HTTP session attribute listener. For request, sublet request event, sublet request listener. And for request attribute, sublet request attribute event and sublet request attribute listener. Okay. This way, if you remember, you can remember easily. Okay. Otherwise, you will get confused with the name. An internal structure is same. So sublet context attribute event, it has two instance variable, right? String name and string value. The value is not a string, value is object. Let me remember. Yeah, value is object. Sublet context attribute value is object type. Parameter is string type. Parameter is string type, but attribute is always object type. is string type, but attribute value is always object type. So, in sublet context attribute event constructor, there are three parameters. One is sublet context, source, string name, and object value. What this constructor do? This name and object it directly assign to this name and this value. It holds its locally, right? Name equal to this dot name equal to name and this dot equal to value. Right? These two parameters is held by this event locally. And what is with sublet context? Who hold this source? Actually, this is held by, this source is held by this event object, the parent one. Because the parent one, event object already is as source. Right?
Yes,
So what class? First of all super. And if we use super, it must be the first statement.
yes,
Inside a constructor or inside a method, if you want to use super, then it must be the first statement, right? We can't write super after writing some statement, right? Like this way. If we write this, are we able to write this? We can't write this. Because this clear instruction that if you want to use super, then it must be the first statement. So, and what super will do? It will call the parent constructor, right? First, super source. It will call the parent constructor. And who is the parent of this constructor? Event object. Who is the immediate parent?
immediate parent sublet context event.
Sublet context event, it has a parameter, it has a constructor. So, super will call, super source will call this constructor, right? This source is assigned here. And what this constructor do? This will also call super. That means the immediate parent of sublet context event and assign the source. So it will call event object constructor, right?
Yes, sir.
And this source is held locally by event object. That is the structure. So the point.
Yes, sir.
And the remaining name and value is held locally by this sublet context attribute event. Okay. Now question is why? If you want to ask, if you have a question in your mind that why name and value is handled locally by this event class and sublet context is not handled or held locally. Suppose if we write here sublet context C. And now if we want to assign instead of super, if we want to assign C equal to source, what will be the problem? What is it right? Right way to define? What is the problem with this statement? Let me tell you. For the entire application, there is only one sublet context object. Okay. For sublet context attribute event, this is actually manipulate the name value. That means the attribute name and attribute value. But for sublet context, through the entire application, there is only one object. So it is better to hold it inside the event object. I will explain it later. Okay. After request session, I will explain this. So this is the internal structure. Sublet context, attribute event. It has a constructor and it has two methods. What are the method? You can guess also. Suppose we have added an attribute. Sublet context attribute event. Which are the events? Events are, suppose we have added one attribute. Added one attribute, right? Suppose replaced one attribute. Remove that attribute. So these three are actually event. Getting the value is not an event. Exactly these three are event. Is there anything you can do with the attribute? Any other thing? Any other action you can do with this attribute? No. There is exactly three action you can take. Three event exactly there. You can add, you can replace, or you can remove. Okay, these three are exactly event. So attribute added. Suppose one attribute is added. Who is added? You need to store it now locally. Who is added? Anyone is added. Who is added? If you want to track this, so that's why the name and value. If you want to get the name of the attribute, which one has been added, or which one has been removed, or which one has been replaced, which attribute has been added, which attribute has been replaced, or which attribute has been removed. If you want to get the name or get the value, that's why this method introduced two new method. One is public string get name. That means get a set. Get name. It will return you the attribute name. Which one has been added or removed or replaced. Return name. Another is, I think you can guess now.
Set name.
Right?
Set name.
Set name. We cannot set any attribute through outside. It is restricted. That's why no setter is there. Only getter. That is restricted. If you want to set attribute, then in sublet context, inside sublet context, there is a method set attribute. Here, to directly through event, we cannot set attribute. When this method will be called? When an attribute already added or removed or replaced. Okay, setter is called another part. If you want to set, other classes or interfaces are responsible to handle this. But it is event. Event means you have already added. That means you have already set an attribute. Okay. So at that event, after adding an attribute or after setting an attribute, this will be called. That is get value. Return value. When it's real type is, the value is object type. So this is the exactly internal structure of sublet context attribute event. Now look at the internal structure of sublet context attribute listener. So listener, each and every listener is an interface, right? And it directly or indirectly inherit event listener. Object interface. It also extends into the family. also extends event listener, not sublet context attribute, sublet context listener. Okay, like you can like sublet context attribute event, it extends the parent word sublet context event, right? But it directly each and every attribute also, each and every attribute, sublet request attribute event, HTTP session attribute event, attribute listener also directly extends event listener, and it has exactly 3 abstract methods, and which are according to the event. So, who are the event or which are the event? Added is an event, replaced is an event, removed is an event, right? So, for these 3 events, there are exactly 3 methods. Okay. Right. Attribute element. Attribute. Attribute. Remove. And as I previously told you, each and every method of listener, you have to it passes the corresponding event object, right? So, who is the corresponding event object? Sublet context attribute event is the corresponding event object, right? This is the internal structure of these 2 classes and interfaces. Okay. Now, suppose, for an example, suppose I want to add some attribute or remove some attribute or replace some attribute. Then at that event, I want to do something. Very simple. So simply, suppose I want to print who has been added, or which one has been removed, or which one has been replaced. Okay. So how to do this? Using that listener interface. Using that listener interface, we can do this. As a developer, using that listener, we can do this. Now, we can use the same listener also. If we write here, it implements sublet context listener. If we a class can implement many other interfaces, right?
Yes, sir.
We can make multiple inheritance using interface, right? Otherwise, multiple inheritance is restricted in Java. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
So, using interface or implements, we can make it. We can create a multiple inheritance hierarchy, right? So, if you also want to implement Servlet context attribute listener, it is also possible, right? Now, suppose for simplicity, I suppose I want to make a new class. Okay. Inside the same class, you can also do this. And you also do that. Okay. A very suitable example will be for context, create a class. For request, create another class. For session, create another class. For 3 scope, 3 classes. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So for context scope, we have 2 listeners. One is sublet context listener, and another is sublet context attribute listener. Okay. We can use these 2 in a same class. So I am using another approach, and this is not the practical approach exactly. Okay. But whenever you will do this, for 3 scope, you just prepare only 3 classes. And for make change, suppose a suitable name will be, suppose this is our web app 1, right? Suppose suitable name, suppose library system. Suppose our content name is library system. So So make a suitable name. Suppose library system context listener, library system request listener, library system session listener. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, then করে দিচ্ছি তাহলে। Subject, context, attribute, listener. Okay. So in subject context attribute listener, how many abstract methods inside there? How many abstract methods it has?
3.
So it is the responsibility of the child class to define all the methods. No?
Yes.
If you want to implement any interface, then it is the responsibility of the child one to define all the body, define the method of all the body, define the body of all the method.
Yes, sir.
So that's why this error. Now we have implemented. Error has gone. So context initialized and context destroy. These two methods come from subject context listener. In the next section, attribute added, attribute removed, attribute replaced. These two methods, attribute added, attribute replaced, attribute removed. You have to define here. So suppose one attribute has been added, and suppose we want to print your log which attribute has been added, or which attribute has been removed, or which attribute has been replaced in the current value. Okay, then how to do this? Context. Context attribute added. Suppose name. Suppose you want to print the name of the attribute. Okay. Then how to get the name and value? From which object we can get name of the name and value?
If
Exactly.
if you don't get name.
Why? Because subject context attribute event, if you look the internal structure of this event has two instance variable, right? Name and value.
Yes.
And has a two getter method, get name and get value. So using these two getter method, we can get the name and then value, right?
Yes, sir.
Then use it. That's why this is the internal structure of listener and event. Okay. So each and every listener method, we need to pass the corresponding. Actually, we don't need to pass. It already an inbuilt class. The structure is this way has been created. Okay. That's why it passes the corresponding event object. If the corresponding event object is not passed here, suppose it is an empty, then are you able to print the name and value?
No, sir.
First question is from which object we can get the name and value, right? So that's why the name is pd dot get name. Or you can print in a standard way. Okay. Class actually it is a map. Suitable symbol is this for map. So this way we can print. Now suppose one attribute is removed, and we want to print in our log. Attribute removed. Okay. If it is removed, then we have nothing to do with the value, right?
Yes.
Only print the name. Attribute replaced. If it is replaced, then we need to print, suppose we want to print the new value. This is the very simple example. Now, we didn't create any new listener, so we don't need to map any listener. This listener is already mapped, right? Suppose change the name, make a suitable name. Suppose a suitable name already. Application name, then context listener. Okay. Now let's check it. First of all, so it is working as previous. Servlet context initialize. Servlet context initialize. Okay. Look at here. One attribute has been added by the server, Jasper. I did not add this because server, when the server create the object, context object, server internally add something on context object. Okay. Context attribute added. Jasper type object has been added. I didn't do it. So whoever, maybe the server or maybe the developer or maybe any user. Okay. You have added anything. The event has been occurred. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
The event has occurred. That's why this method, this message is printing attribute added. That means attribute added method has been called. Okay. Now suppose externally I want to manipulate something. Okay. So I won't take Java class. I will take JSP file because for JSP we don't need to disturb the server. If we write this code in Java class, we need to disturb the server, right?
Yes, sir.
Make a new JSP file. Suppose in now our welcome page is registration.jsp. So from registration.jsp, suppose I want to link in new. end of this form. Suppose you have made change in DSP file, so we don't need to restart the server. You just need to reload the page. This is the link, ABC. You can click on it. Not found. The path is not correct. That's why. ABC is inside view folder. So you need to mention view. Correct. So this is our ABC page. Now, using abc.jsp. You can read the subject context object. Dot subject context. You can directly call get subject context. So now we have context object. So I want to add some attribute on context object. So how to add? Context dot attribute. This is the method. This is the method. One of you has mentioned that get name, set name and set value, right? This is not inside subject context attribute event. Why? Because there is no provision to set any attribute. Why? Because this method will be called or this event will occur when you have already added it. So provision to add some attribute is in another place. Okay. And in which place? In this place. In subject context, there is a method set attribute. Suppose any attribute. So city. Suppose in 700. Okay. So in this JSP, in context scope, we have added two attributes. One is with city, another name is pin. Okay. This is the attribute name and this is the attribute value. Now let's check. Clear the console. Context object is already created, so you don't create any other new object. Now look at the console. In JSP, MC.JSP, this code has been executed, right?
Yes.
So what are the internal code? Context.set attribute, context.set attribute. So we have added two attributes. One is city, another is pin. Now, if you see the console, context, attribute added, city, Kolkata, attribute added pin. Is it working? And from where this message is printing? This message is printing by calling this method, attribute added. So we have added and added to attribute. So that's why this method has been called by the event. Okay. Now, if we replace some attribute, replace, then check it. Is it working or not? So in abc.jsp, after adding something, this context dot remove attribute. Suppose remove attribute. You want to remove suppose pin. Here the console. Reload the page. Look, attribute replaced, city and pin. Okay, and attribute remove name pin. The first question is attribute removed. This message is okay. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
But here context.set attribute. Now it is showing us attribute replaced. Why? It should print attribute added. Yes or no?
It already present in the same okay. CTL.
Exactly. What we have done, we did not stop the server. So context attribute is previously created. And in context attribute, we have added already city and pin. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Now, context attribute has how many attributes? 2 attributes with name city and pin. But each and every time you set with you execute this, it will always what will do? Replace the value. It will always replace the value. Suppose context.set attribute city Kolkata. Okay. Now if we execute again this, if we execute it again what will internally it will do? Internally it will replace the value of city with the new value of city. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
That's all. Now, if we again execute this statement. So first tell me, now how many attribute has been is inside context scope? Right now, how many attributes it has?
One. CT.
Because pin is removed, right?
Yes.
Now, if we execute the same statement after this, what it should print?
Added.
Exactly. It will again for attribute added. Let's check. This is the previous log. Again, reload the file. Context attribute replaced city Kolkata. It is expected because already city was there. Right? Now, when it has executed, context.set attribute pin this. Pin was not there, so pin has been
Added.
Now remove pin. Now we don't have any pin, so again it is added. So any confusion?
No, sir.
So there are total how many event and listener, process and databases are there. For session, it is a bit different, but context and request, the structure is same. Context and request structure is same. For sublet context listener and sublet context event, and for sublet request, sublet request event and sublet request listener, both the structure are same. Okay. Session is bit different. Request also has sublet request attribute listener and sublet request attribute event. How to use this? The same as we have created with context. Okay. Same to same as session. Session is bit different. Why? Because session is bit confusing. It has two events. One is HTTP session event, another is HTTP session binding event. But in case of listener for session, HTTP session listener, HTTP session attribute listener, HTTP session activation listener, HTTP session binding listener. Which listener to use? We need to use these two. Okay. For binding purpose or activation purpose, these two listener is internally handled by the server. These two listener is internally handled by the server. We can code it. We can inherit it and write some code on it. But in general task, these two listener is enough. Okay. Actually, these sections are a bit of boring. If you try to learn it, these sections are a bit of boring. But if you cover up once, it is interesting. And it has some useful, it is important also. Okay. Not all the time. At the time of creating the structure of a project, this we actually then code this kind of thing. Okay. Not in daily our life, only simple changes. We don't actually we don't generally code with event listener in daily life. Okay. Suppose you have created a project. Then at the time of creating a project or creating the main engine, then actually this kind of coding we need to do. Suppose you have to create a new form, you have to create a new module to get some data from this table, this table, this table. At that time of daily work, this session and event is not necessary for developer to code it. Okay, but yet it is important. And one important features I have told you with context.
Yes.
With a swipe card example. Okay. So till now, any confusion?
No.
Okay. Then I'm going to end the session.
Okay.
No. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Good
Good night. Good night, sir.
Bye.